Hey guys. Who's a tenant in here right now? Who's a renter? Who's been a renter? Okay. A tenant is a renter. Who's renting an apartment or a house or something? Okay, so in California, there's some specific laws that apply to tenant, landlord-tenant rights. But every contract, every time you rent from an apartment or a home, you're entering into a contract, right? Does everyone know what a contract is? It's an agreement saying that I'm going to do something, and the other side saying I'll do something in return. So you're going to pay rent, you're going to be a good tenant, you're going to keep the place clean, and in return they're going to allow you to live there. Okay, so it's an agreement. It goes both ways. But there's some rules, some basic principles that to be a good tenant, being a good tenant really goes a long way. Okay, so what is a good tenant? A good tenant is someone who's going to keep the place clean, who's going to pay the rent on time, who's going to communicate. So let's say if there's a time that you don't have the rent money to pay your rent on time, you're going to be a couple days late. What do? Do we not call the landlord? What should we do? We should call the landlord, communicate with them. But let's back up. Let's start at the beginning. When we decide to rent, we're going to enter into a contract, a rental agreement. It's going to be in writing. We're going to sign it. Who has a month-to-month, 30-day lease right now? Okay, so that's a real common one where you rent an apartment or a home and it's on a 30-day basis. That means that you can live there 30 days and it continues on until you say stop, but you always have to give 30 days notice. There's other contracts. Some apartment buildings want you to sign a 6-month agreement, a 3-month agreement, a year agreement. Okay. So those are some of the terms. So who has a 6-month agreement or a year agreement, something beyond a 30-day? All right, see, so those are pretty common, especially in the apartments that they can rent real easy. They want people who are willing to stay for a longer period of time. We need to make sure that we understand what agreement we're entering into when we rent an apartment or a home. So be clear on that. You don't want to sign something that you don't know what it is. You don't want to sign a year agreement if you're planning on moving in 2 months. Or 30 days, because then you could be liable for the entire year's rent. Let's say you signed a year contract. That means that you are going to stay there for a year. So if you give notice before that time, that's not going to work out because you could be responsible legally for the entire year's rent. Okay? So in a 30-day, month-to-month tenancy is what they call it, you have the right to stay there indefinitely until the landlord wants you to be gone or you decide to move out. And if you're going to move out, what do? What do we have to do? We have to communicate. We have to give them a 30-day written notice, okay? You don't want to just call them. You should call them as a courtesy, but you also want to say, Mr. Landlord, I'm planning on moving out in 30 days. Here's my 30-day notice, okay? So that 30-day notice on a month-to-month basis is really important. But let's say that I've moved in when I started I pay my rent on the 1st, okay? But I give my notice, my 30-day notice on the 10th, okay? So what are you responsible for as far as your rent after that? You're responsible for the next 30 days. So you're going to be responsible all the way until the 10th of the next month. You don't get to live there, even though you normally pay your rent on the 1st. You say, well, I usually pay my rent on the 1st, but I gave my notice, so I don't have to pay rent on the 1st now just because I'm moving out. No, that's wrong. You're going to be responsible for the next 9 days' rent. Okay, to the 10th. And they can break it down day by day how much your rent would be, and they send you a bill for say $222.10, and you're saying, wait, I gave you my notice, I'm moving out, I don't have to pay rent this month. Well, that's wrong. You do have to pay because they could have been renting to somebody else had you moved out, right? So they would have been shorted 10 days rent, 9 days, or 10 days rent. So you're responsible for the entire 30 days rent after you give your notice. Okay. Now on a year lease or a 6-month lease, there's usually a provision what notice you need to provide, but you should always still give 30 days, at least 30 days notice if you want to stop your year tenancy. Okay, so let's say I have a year lease and I go that entire year, and let's say I started in June of 1 year. I go all the way to the next year in June and I'm planning on moving out. What happens if I don't give 30 days notice at the end of that? Does anyone know? What happens is it turns into a month-to-month lease agreement. Okay, it automatically turns into that. So you can stay. It's going to go to a month-to-month unless you and the landlord have agreed otherwise. They may have you sign another year contract. They may have you sign. They usually will send you some kind of letter, something saying, "Hey, your year's coming up. what do you want to do? We can renew your lease. They might have a rent increase a little bit, something like that. Now you can always call them and say, hey, I'd like to stay, but can we work on that? Depends on your landlord. You know, if you have a good relationship with your landlord, you might be able to negotiate that back down to your previous one, but you have to give notice if you're planning on moving out. Otherwise, you might be responsible beyond that period. Okay, so make sure that you give good notice. And so good communication really is the key with your landlord. Some landlords are tough. Most of them are good. Okay, most of them are good people, and they're willing to communicate, especially if you're kind to them, if you're keeping their property in a good condition. Maybe if you're the tenant who's willing to call and say, hey, you know, you got this one tenant and they're destroying your property. Just good communication and being a good person goes a long way in a landlord-tenant agreement. Okay, so what do? When we move in, we're going to sign a contract. So we've talked about the month-to-month, the year, the 6 months. We got to know what term we're talking about. We got to know what our rent's going to be. When's it going to be due? Be clear on that. Obviously, we want to be timely with our rent, if at all possible. If we can't pay our rent on time, communication. Okay, that's not a legal principle. That's just a good practice to do, because if you do that, that landlord's going to be a lot more flexible with you. You know, you might not get that 3-day notice saying you need to get out because you didn't pay your rent, or the 30-day notice saying, hey, I'm going to evict you because I don't want you here because you're late on your rent every month, so you're gone. And we'll talk about the eviction process in a little bit, but very rarely does the tenant prevail in those situations when you end up in court. You know, ultimately what usually happens is you get a big judgment against you for their legal fees and everything else, and that's something that you don't want to have happen, because even if you can't pay it now and it's just a piece of paper, we all have goals and dreams, and so when it's time to go buy that house, you have a judgment against you. That's going to show up. It's going to haunt you. It's going to follow you all the way to the time you want to buy that house, or you get a job and you're going to get, you know, a nice job, and then all of a sudden you get an order from the court saying we're taking half of your wages because you know 10 years ago you got evicted and you didn't have to pay anything then. You thought you got away with it, but you still have to pay that money.
Like Uncle Sam gets his money.
That's right. It will follow you. It will definitely follow you. So you want to make sure you do that. So when we move in, this is something that I've been a renter before. In fact, I'm a lawyer, but I also own a business in Fresno, so I have an apartment in Fresno. So I've just went through this recently. When you move in, they're going to go through like an inventory sheet, and you're going to do a walkthrough. It might look something like this. Okay. So when you go through and do your walkthrough, don't just sign off and say everything's fine. I'm so excited about getting this new apartment. You got to really look through in detail, because they're going to go check list by list, you know, item by item. They're going to say, oh, this wall, we think it's clean, but you say, hey, wait, there's a scratch there. Note that. So they'll note it. So, and you keep a copy of this. When they go through, they're going to look at the carpets. They're going to look at the cleanliness. So if, let's say the windows or the blinds are dusty, make sure they put a note of that. Hey, the blinds are dusty. Just tell them. Say, oh yeah, the blinds are a little dusty. And they'll either say, well, we'll clean that before you move in, or I'll just note it and you can take care of it. So what happens at the end of, let's say 6 months later, they come back through and they do an exit inspection. Okay, and what they're going to do is they're going to determine whether or not they need to take money out of your security deposit, because usually you have to pay a security deposit to move in. Let's say it's 1 month's rent. You know, let's say it's a $700 a month apartment. They might take $700 as a deposit, and they're going to go through. And some of these landlords are going to be trying to find whatever they can so they can get their apartment cleaned and maybe the carpet replaced or whatever. And what you're responsible for is any damage that you caused. Okay, normal wear and tear, you're not responsible for that, but normal wear and tear is very mild damage or mild wear, you know, on the carpet. And it depends how the carpet was when you moved in. So, and the longer you're there, the more wear and tear you'll get. So if you're only there for 6 months, if you ended up in court in front of a judge, usually the landlord's going to win on a lot of these issues. Okay, let's say there was a cigarette burn. Someone smoked in your house and the carpet got burned. Obviously, you're going to be responsible for that. Let's say it was a guest of somebody that you hardly even knew, and they came over and they dropped a cigarette and they burned your carpet. You're going to be responsible for that, not the landlord, okay? Let's say when you're moving in to the apartment and you broke one of the lights up on the ceiling, which I just did like 2 weeks ago. And I'm thinking, this sucks. I just moved in. I broke something already. So who's going to pay for that? I'm going to pay for that, okay? Now, the stuff that I'm not going to pay for is going to be the stuff that was noted as already damaged when I moved in. Okay, so that's why you need to have a good eye and really look at every little detail. You know, make sure the refrigerator was clean. Make sure the carpets are cleaned. If there's spots on the carpet, make a note of it. Have them make a note. And if it's something that's big, you might even want to take your cell phone and snap a picture of it. That doesn't hurt. And you can keep a record of that. Okay, so I say this not because I'm real good at it, but because I know it's the best thing to do. And there's some people that are really organized. So they take this sheet and they keep a little file and they say rental file. Okay, so they keep that. So when they do their exit interview, they can say, you know, and the landlord says, well, I'm charging you for all this. And you pull this out and you say, well, that cigarette burn in the carpet was already here, remember? Oh yeah, okay, so I won't charge you for that. All right, there are spots on the carpet, other spots, dirty spots. Oh, okay, I won't charge you for that. There was a mark on the wall. All right, I won't charge you for that. Well, then they go in the room and there's a hole in the wall behind the door. Uh-oh, that wasn't there. Guess who's paying for that? Even if it was there already, if it's not on this sheet, you're going to be on the hook. So keep a good eye out for those things, okay? And keep a copy of this. Because if you don't keep a copy of that, all of a sudden, some things might be off this sheet if there's a bad landlord. Yes, sir.
I think some landlords even have to, like the little plastic face plates over all the outlets and switches and stuff like that. If they have a crack, you need to note that, because they'll charge you even though it's only $1 something.
Any crack.
But then they say, but I got to pay my handyman to go out there, and so it's going to be $50.
Absolutely.
All the stuff. So yeah, all those things that are cracked, show some kind of wear, noted on that sheet.
Yeah. So that's something that's just a good practice to do. Even though it might take you 30 minutes of a walkthrough, look at every little thing. Because the little crack in the faceplate, like Oscar's saying, they could end up charging you, and it seems like that would only cost a couple bucks, but then they have to pay some guy $25 an hour to come out and do it, and he does a minimum fee of $25 for a visit, even though it takes him 2 minutes. So now you got a $30 charge for this little faceplate. Okay, so be really, really aware of that. Take the time and do it. All right. Being a good tenant, this is not. Again, I mentioned this earlier, it goes a long, long way to having a good relationship and not getting yourself in trouble at the end, okay? Because if you are a good tenant, they see that you're diligent, they see that you're not messing the place up. When it comes time that you need something, like, hey, I'm gonna be 2 days late on my rent, and you've called them and said, hey, I'm gonna be 2 days late, most landlords are gonna appreciate that. Now, there's gonna be the exception where you have this bad landlord, he's just a mean guy. And, you got to be aware of that, and you may want to try to find a different place in the long run. But even the bad guys, you can kind of endear to them. I'm a lawyer and I'm litigating cases, and we're fighting. My procedure, my policy and practice is if it's a mean, tough lawyer on the other side, by the end of that case, my goal is to be in a situation where he respects me, he likes me, he communicates with me, and he somehow has changed his behavior because I was kind to him and professional with him. I'd take my positions and I would fight hard, but everyone heard the saying that you get a lot more, you get a lot more bees with honey than vinegar, right? And that's a really good practice to have in the landlord-tenant relationship, and really in all relationships, employer-employee relationships. You respect people, you treat them kindly, and it goes a long way. So we talked about what you're responsible for at the end and what's going to come out of your security deposit. Clean the place really good, because you can, if you leave dust that wasn't there at the beginning, they can charge you for dust in it, dust in the windshield, window sills, the refrigerator. If it was clean and you left some stuff and there's stuff at the bottom, there's juice and things at the bottom, they can charge you for that. Okay, they can charge you for cleaning the carpets to a reasonable degree if the carpets were really clean, but you're not responsible for the normal wear and tear. But like I said, if it's not a long-term relationship and or a long-term tenancy. Yes, go ahead.
Do you have to pay for the carpet even if the landlord plans to put in tile after you move out?
Well, it depends on the age of the carpet and if it was really bad.
So it's like that crappy office carpet.
Yeah. See, they can make a decision to remove even good carpet, and that's their own decision, whether you were living there or not. So if the carpet was so bad that it had to be replaced, it got that old, then it would be unlikely that you would have to pay for that. Okay? But here's the reality of a tenant versus a landlord. Okay? And this applies to any situation where a landlord has done you wrong. All right? You're upset. They've done you wrong. They're not. Let's say they didn't fix something. They have the ability to have a lawyer, okay? They can come hire someone like me. And how much do lawyers cost? Yeah, like how much an hour? I mean, anywhere between $200 an hour and $400 an hour, okay? So landlord, he's got his lawyer, he calls up and he doesn't care. You're gonna bring a claim against him. Or let's say you're gonna fight. Let's say you're moving out and the landlord he's charging you for the carpet, even though he's gonna put tile in, and you think that's wrong. Well, the reality is it's gonna be a tough fight because if you end up in court, it's gonna cost you a lot of time and effort. The landlord usually is gonna win that because he's gonna have some lawyer, and you're not gonna be able to hire a lawyer. I'm not saying that you could never win, and you can represent yourself in court, but it's a tough situation. Okay, so I don't know all the facts about that carpet, but again, this goes back to being a good tenant, communicating and developing a good relationship, and really finding a good landlord. If you have a good landlord, that's also a big thing. So when you're renting a place, there's a lot of places to rent. So if you notice right off the bat that this guy's a jerk, even though you love the place, you may decide, maybe I should go elsewhere and try to find a better landlord. Because that can really cause a lot of headaches for you. Yeah.
Are you talking about infestations?
Yeah, in every one of your rights as a tenant, this is a legal term, but there's an implied warranty of habitability, okay? And that basically means that the landlord has a responsibility to keep the place in a good place to live, a healthy place that's not going to be unsafe for you or your family. Okay, for example, let's say that there is an infestation of bed bugs, okay? Well, bed bugs is a tough example. You may have brought those in, so you may not be responsible for that, but roaches is a good example. So there's roaches everywhere. It's a problem that is not caused by you keeping the place dirty, because some people bring in roaches because they don't clean their apartment, and that may be your responsibility and your fault. Okay, let's just say it's an older apartment building and he hasn't done anything to spray for bugs or roaches. Then that would be a situation you call your landlord and you give him notice. And really the best thing to do is call him, have that good relationship, and call and say, hey, there's roaches everywhere. Could you take care of the problem? And then you would really want to follow up with a letter, so you have a writing to say, please take care of the roaches. And they don't, and the roaches are everywhere, and they're crawling in your kid's bed. It's unhealthy to be in that situation. And the right that you have is you could pay to have those roaches sprayed for in your apartment and taken care of. And then you could deduct that amount from your rent, as long as it's not more than the cost of the rent. So let's say that it's roaches, I spray because he's not taking care of it. You have to give him a chance to take care of it first. He doesn't take care of it for a month, and you really feel like this is just unacceptable, so you pay to have it fixed. Now you can deduct that from your rent. You send them a check with the invoice for the pest control that you sprayed for. A lot of landlords may accept that. Some landlords may fight you on it, and they may in turn say, I'm evicting you because for failure to pay your full rent, right? Let's assume for a second that you are 100% correct, that you had every legal right to do that. Where are you going to end up? In court. And then what's the landlord come and say? He's going to say, we don't have a roach problem. The tenant keeps their apartment so filthy that he's brought roaches to my entire building because he never cleans. He's got food everywhere. He's got dishes everywhere. He's probably never vacuumed the carpet. It's basically a magnet for bugs and roaches. And the judge is looking at this tenant, this landlord, and then he's looking at the tenant, and you're saying, "No, there's bugs everywhere." And the judge starts asking you some questions. Maybe the landlord has some pictures of your house being real dirty. And the judge is thinking, I don't know. His landlord seems, he's maybe thinking, well, maybe the tenant's right, but maybe the landlord's right. And now, all of a sudden, the judge says, yeah, I think it was because they didn't keep their house clean. And I'm going to award the landlord the eviction and his legal fees. Okay? Let's take another example. Let's take a better example of something that, would be, that the judge would probably rule in your favor. Let's say it's a gas leak, right? Real dangerous. You call the landlord. He's like, no, I'm not fixing that. And something you didn't cause, because if you caused it, you have to fix it, okay? It's something that was because the building is old or something inherent in the building itself, not because you caused it. Because if you caused it, he doesn't have to fix it, okay? So the gas leak, you call him, the landlord says, I'm not fixing that. Or he just doesn't show up. Then you call the plumber or whoever, and they come out and they fix it for you. All right, and you say, I'm deducting this from my rent. Keep an invoice, keep the amount you paid, and show it that it was paid when you send a letter to the landlord. And then when you end up in court, when he tries to evict you for failing to pay the full amount of rent, the judge is going to say, landlord, this is dangerous. This could kill people. You should have fixed this. Then you win, okay? You're going to win that case. It's got to be pretty clear when you decide to use your right to not pay the full amount of rent, and you have to have paid the amount to deduct it. If it's real dangerous, you also have the right to abandon the apartment, but be very careful if you do that, because you could end up in a situation where maybe the judge wouldn't have agreed with you that you had the right to abandon. But something like a gas leak and you didn't have the money to fix it, you could abandon the apartment and stop paying rent. Okay? Something that's going to hurt you or your family, or be a risk to you or your family. All right? Yes?
What if we told them we knew where the roaches came from and they still didn't do anything about it? And what if the person, because he had someone come out, but comes to find out it was like one of his golf buddies or something like that, and the spray is so diluted, I can literally just stand in there without even like smelling anything. And he's came out a couple of times, but only until I threatened to go to the health department.
Well, that's if he's coming out and trying to do it and he has to be reasonable. He has to do what a normal person that would be responsible would do.
But he doesn't even give the tenants notice of when the bug guy's coming out. Like how they're supposed to tell you, because like he'll come out, oh, are you guys ready? Ready for what? Oh, do you have all this stuff out of your cabinets? No. Like they don't even tell us, and it's like
here's the simple answer. The short answer is that you might be 100% correct, and you might win if you ended up in court if you fix the problem, or you decided not to pay rent until he fixed it. Because that's another thing. If it's a bad problem, you can, under the law, but it's risky. You can withhold your rent until he fixes the problem. It's another thing you can do. Okay, because when he doesn't get his rent check, what's he going to do? He's going to be calling you. You say, you know what, I'll pay it as soon as you fix this, because this is really bad. Okay, but it's risky, because you may end up in an eviction process that you may or may not have the ability to fight. Okay, if you're ready to go to court and ready to battle, and you think this is the right thing to do because you have to do it, and you can take that chance. But I've seen a lot of people take that chance and end up on the losing stick, because then landlord has high-powered lawyer coming in, and you're against the high-powered lawyer, and there's these long lists of laws. And did you provide proper notice to the landlord? Did you serve him with the complaint correctly? Did you do all these things? Usually the guy that's representing himself in court loses. Okay, that's against a lawyer.
Well spoke.
Because you're going to fall into these traps. You don't know all the laws. I mean, you go to law school for 3 years of intense studying of law after you go to college, And it's a tough battle. But you do have that right. Now, my answer to you is that the place you really want to live, and is it the right landlord?
No, because they crawl all over my children
Yeah.
at night.
Yeah, so I would say, start looking for a new landlord.
It's not that easy.
I know it's not easy, but some things aren't easy. But when there's roaches crawling over your kids and the guy's not fixing it, what you may want to do in that situation is you may send them a letter saying, "Hey, the roaches are crawling over my kids at night. It's really unhealthy."
Can't you just go to the housing authority?
You can go to the housing authority as well. That's another option. That's a good remedy if they're willing to go out and check it. Then they get a lot of complaints, and they may or may not go out and check things.
They investigate.
Yeah. Well, then you should. Have you done that? Have you gone to the housing authority? Have you gone to the housing authority and complained?
Yeah, because I'm still trying to give them a chance to. But
How long have you been dealing with it?
For a long time.
Okay, well then you should probably go. Last thing I want to talk about is the notices, so the eviction process. And the landlord say you haven't paid rent. You may get a 3-day notice to pay or quit, meaning you pay rent or you need to get out. If you don't pay within that 3 days, if you pay within the 3 days, you can correct it. Okay. If you don't pay within that 3 days, and you pay after that, the landlord could still then institute eviction process and get you out, even though you've paid it afterward. Okay, so you might not have a choice after you're 3 days late. He may still evict you. There's other things. Let's say there's unlawful activity that's happening in the apartment. Let's say you have a roommate, okay, that's dealing drugs or something. You're like, yeah, he can evict you for that, and you don't have the right to cure that. Let's say that there's domestic violence, like by one of the. You have a roommate or somebody in your family that's living there at the apartment, and they go beat somebody up or sexually assault somebody in the apartment building. They can evict you for that. You have no right to cure that. Okay. Let's say that you're playing your music loud and having parties a few nights a week. Okay. He can evict you for that because you're a nuisance to your neighbors. All right. But there's certain things. Let's say you're not keeping it clean. It's just obvious you're keeping a bunch of stuff out in your patio. It just looks like a wreck. That may be something that you could cure that. He could give you a 3-day notice to cure the mess that you've made. Then you cure it, and you're okay. If you cure it after that 3-day notice, then he can still evict you, start the eviction process. So you may get a 3-day notice served on you, and there's some things that you can. Usually it's going to be for the failure to pay rent. You can correct that within that 3 days and not be evicted. You may get a 30-day notice to evacuate the premises, to leave, which means that you're no longer going to be able to be there. Then, and in those situations, there could be a variety. It could be for the failure to pay rent or for any of these other things, being a bad tenant, and then that will start the eviction process if you don't get out within that 30 days. All right. Now, I'm going to give you a couple sources. Okay. So right there, www.dca.calca.gov/publications/landlordbook/index.shtml. There is a wealth of information about all your tenant rights in there, what you can and can't do. And there's lots of different topics, everything from the eviction process to advice about when you rent to about the warranty of habitability. There's going to be information probably about how to handle like a bug roach situation like that. Bless you. That's a really, really good source that's going to talk about all your rights and give you some good advice. So if you ever have a problem with your landlord, or if you want to know what your rights are, that's going to have a lot of the answers, okay? Lots of the answers. But be aware, once again, when you're going to assert your right as a tenant, understand that it could be a tough process, okay? Understand that you may not be able to battle that big lawyer, but there are going to be situations where you're going to be in the right and the judge will go in your favor, especially with these bad landlords that just don't respond ever, that don't take any action. The fact that they have bug guys going out is going to go in favor. Sometimes it might be difficult to cure it, and it might take a period of time to figure out how to cure it. The judge will look at that as saying, well, at least he is going out there and trying to get the job done. That's just one factor. If it's been a year and the roaches are still crawling over your kids, and they're everywhere, and you're taking pictures of it, and you say, look, Judge, there's pictures, here's the roaches, the more evidence you have, the better. But be aware that it could be risky, and it could end up
So what's the longest
hurting
period
you.
of time?
It goes by a case-by-case scenario. It's all based on the facts and how.
It's been about 8 months for me.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell you that because I don't know all the facts and I haven't seen all the evidence, like I wouldn't be able to tell you one way or the other. But it goes on a case-by-case basis. Yes.
Let's say we have the same problem. We've had 3 different managers. We've told every one of them, and that we've written notices and told them about it and everything, and they haven't done it.
Okay, you're taking the right steps. It's best to again, make a track record of it in writing. If you're seeing the problem, take pictures of it. That's evidence of it. When you take the picture, make sure you date it. Make sure it's clear where the picture was taken. Okay. Send that to the send a copy to the landlord. Send it in writing. And if it gets to the point where it's really bad, you do have the right to withhold your rent, but be ready to fight and be ready to have all that evidence to support your case. Maybe call the housing authority before you take that step because it's risky.
It's not only, we're moving, so I'm happy about that, but it's not only roaches, it's turned into mice.
Okay. Well, everyone gets mice from time to time, even nice houses.
Infestation of mice.
Really, it's the same thing. You got to give notice. You got to let the landlord have a chance to fix it. And if they're not doing what's reasonable, then you can assert your rights.
He hasn't done anything. He hasn't called any bug people, people to get rid of the mice.
Or you can go buy mouse traps, and then
We've tried.
yeah, it's too many mice.
You start shooting them and leaving them like that, and they won't come around. Just a theory.
Well, this is when the topic goes into. This is why you want to go to summer school at BC, because then then you can get an education. Then you don't have to deal with landlords like this, right?
Yes.
And maybe you get straight A's and then get a scholarship, and then you live somewhere else, and
I like this landlord a lot better.
That's good. That's good, and that's why I say, really be selective. I mean, I know it's hard because when you're young and you don't have tons of money coming in, it's hard. So you gotta go. I mean, I was there. You got to pay the rent that's affordable, and a lot of times that's not the best places. But there are people who have homes and apartments at that level. So just keep searching. And if you get a 30-day, month-to-month tenancy, I don't know what the market is like in Bakersfield right now. Is it normally they want 6 months, or what are you guys experiencing? They want 6 months to a year. So 6 months is not a long time. Start looking if you've realized that it's a bad place, and just really spend time. And if you just keep looking, you'll eventually find the place that you need. But again, when you're young, you go through all that stuff, and as long as you stay on the track, stay in school, keep or work. I mean, not just school, but let's say you're just working and you're being a good employee. I have car washes up in Fresno, and I have employees that they start at $8.50 an hour, but some of them have worked up because they've been good employees. I talked to some of you guys about this last time. The guys that really commit, work hard, they're moving up, and their hourly rate's going up, and some of them have a chance to be managers, and now they're moving out of those apartments because they've done so well at their job. They're respectful to their employer, their bosses. They listen, even if their boss is wrong. They made I've made mistakes, but the guys that say, all right, I'll do it, even though in their head they're thinking, Todd's wrong. They're respectful and professional, and so those guys are moving up, because I recognize that. So that's really what you want to do, is whatever track you're on, just get on the track to where you don't have to deal with these types of landlords, because that's what's going to solve the problem in the long run, because there's always going to be bad landlords. Hopefully you're lucky enough to find a good one, right? That'll listen. But you can take those situations by having a positive relationship with them, even if they're a jerk. Always being kind to them. You may see that how you treat people will change their behavior. Okay? So, and that works with the landlord-tenant relationship. Kill them with kindness. It's a good rule. All right? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Carl.
Okay. Got it.